Have you ever stopped to imagine the weight of carrying the destiny of an entire nation on your shoulders for almost 2 decades and, in the blink of an eye, seeing the most sacred dream of a warrior turn to ashes under the cold lights of a Scandinavian stadium? Football, in its most visceral essence, is not just a game of tactics and goals. It is a theater of tragedies and glories where the gods of sport sometimes choose the cruelest ending for their greatest heroes. The world stopped. The breath of millions of Poles caught in their throats, and the silence that followed the final whistle at Friends Arena was not just the end of a match, but the echo of the collapse of an era. Robert Lewandowski, the man who defied records, who humiliated giants, and who became the living synonym of Polish pride, had just suffered the coup de grace in his international career. Poland's elimination from the 2026 World Cup was not just a statistical result in the UEFA qualifiers, it was the sporting funeral of the greatest legend the White Eagles have ever produced. The scene was worthy of a breathtaking epic. Poland arrived in Sweden knowing there was no room for error. It was all or nothing. The battlefield of the Friends Arena became the stage for a frenetic fight, where every inch of grass was contested as if it were the last frontier of hope. The White Eagles flew low at the beginning, saw Sweden take the lead, but the Polish fighting spirit, personified in the grit of Nikola Zalewski and Karol Swiderski, sought a heroic draw that seemed to keep the dream alive by life support. The 2-2 scoreline brought an almost unbearable electricity to the air. However, football has a perverse sense of irony. When the clock showed 88 minutes and the world was already preparing for extra time, Victor Gyökeres, the new Swedish tormentor, unleashed a precise shot that pierced not only the Polish net, but the heart of Robert Lewandowski. That goal in the 88th minute sealed the fate. Poland was out of the 2026 World Cup. What followed the final whistle was a scene that will be etched in the annals of sports history as one of the most moving moments of all time. Robert Lewandowski didn't scream, didn't protest, didn't break down in hysterical tears. He simply stopped. Amidst the chaos of the Swedish celebrations, the Barcelona giant looked like a marble statue sculpted by pain. There, on that hostile pitch, he understood that his 18-year journey defending his country's colors had reached its final chapter. The reaction that followed on social media was the final blow to the emotion of fans around the globe. Without needing lengthy paragraphs or rehearsed speeches, Lewandowski published a single image that synthesized the feeling of an end of an era. A photo of himself in the middle of the field, his gaze lost in frustration, his hand raised in a silent wave, and in that hand the captain's armband. It wasn't just a farewell gesture. It was the formal handover of command, the recognition that body and soul had given everything they could. Lewandowski's trajectory with the Polish national team is a monument to consistency and excellence. He wasn't just a striker. He was the beacon of a nation that often only had him as a reference on the world stage. From his debut, Robert carried the captain's armband like a crown of thorns and glories, scoring impossible goals and leading teams that, without his presence, would hardly have reached where they did. To see this giant say goodbye without the chance of one last performance on the pitches of North America, Mexico, and Canada in 2026 is a poetic injustice that only football is capable of committing. The image of the armband in his raised hand symbolizes the passing of the baton to a new generation that now looks at the void left by its greatest idol. Poland now enters a period of sporting mourning and reconstruction, trying to understand what tomorrow will be like without its Lewy. Robert Lewandowski ends his international career as the all-time leading scorer for his country, and one of the greatest in the history of European football. But beyond the numbers, there remains the legacy of an exemplary professional who never shied away from responsibility, even when the weight was overwhelming. His departure from the national team is not just a loss for Poland, it's a loss for the 2026 World Cup, which will lack the brilliance of one of the last great number 9s of the old guard. The Barcelona striker will now focus on his challenges at the club, but the wound opened at Friends Arena will take time to heal. The football world bows before the captain, recognizing that, although the final result was elimination, the journey was of an unattainable greatness for most. This is the moment when history becomes myth. Lewandowski leaves the stage, but his image with the captain's armband will remain as the ultimate symbol of, and that, in sports, Dignity in defeat is as important as the euphoria of victory. The star's silence spoke louder than any goal celebration. Poland mourns its idol, but football is grateful for every minute Robert Lewandowski wore the White Eagles jersey. If you also felt the weight of this farewell and believe Lewandowski deserved a different ending, don't forget to support our work. Your interaction is the fuel for us to continue bringing you the most visceral stories from the world of football. Leave your like to honor the captain, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the developments of this new era of world football, and most importantly, comment below, what is your greatest memory of Lewy playing for Poland? Is he the greatest player in the country's history, or does someone still surpass him? We want to know your honest opinion. The debate is open and your voice is fundamental in this community of World Cup enthusiasts. See you in the next play, where the story continues to be written.